Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot onto the warm banks of the Nile. The sun is sliding down the horizon, but the air still clings heavy and damp, full of river mud smells and the faint perfume of lotus drifting in from the reeds. You're here to watch a scene so ordinary that it almost feels eternal. Laundry. Yes, that simple, boring act of keeping clothes somewhat respectable. Except it's not just laundry, it's ancient Egyptian laundry. And that means sun-bleached linen, buckets of river water, and a few odd recipes for soap that you probably don't want to recreate in your kitchen. Spoiler alert, you would not last a day as a laundress on the Nile. Your biceps would give out before the second tunic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you dropped a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fun to see the mix of night owls and early birds in this little sleepy community. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down the riverbank, sandals sinking into damp silt. Around you, villagers are already knee-deep in water, sleeves rolled up, tunics tied high. They slap cloth against flat stones, the sound carrying like rhythmic claps, almost musical if you're in a forgiving mood. The Nile flows past, unbothered, dragging along the day's dust, fish scales, and possibly a crocodile or two. Laundry here is equal parts work and survival, and you feel your shoulders ache just from watching. Fact 1. Egyptians adored linen. It was the fabric of life, worn by pharaohs, priests, and farmers alike. Unlike wool, linen stayed cool in the furnace heat of Egypt, and unlike leather, it let your skin breathe instead of stewing you alive. Linen was sacred too. Mummies were wrapped in it, and temple offerings were made of fine woven sheets. So keeping it clean wasn't just vanity, it was ritual. And yet, here's the quirky bit. While you might picture laundry soap as a bar of Dove or a bottle of Tide, these folks often relied on good old-fashioned elbow grease and river water. Sometimes they added a dash of clay or chalk to scrub stains, like a prehistoric stain stick. Imagine forgetting your favorite tunic on the riverbank, though. You'd be that person who left their laundry downstream, and suddenly everyone else is wearing your pleats. Historians still argue whether washing was always communal, or if wealthy households kept more private wash spaces. The lack of surviving laundry huts keeps the debate alive. You kneel beside one young washerwoman. Her hands are cracked from endless scrubbing, but her laughter carries as she swaps jokes with her neighbor. She dunks the cloth, wrings it, slaps it against stone again and again. The rhythm is hypnotic. You try it once yourself, and your forearm immediately protests. Forget the gym. This is CrossFit with linen. And the river. It's your washing machine, fabric softener, and bleach, all in one endlessly flowing cycle. Well, except it sometimes comes with crocodiles, which modern appliances thankfully don't. The sun dips lower, staining the water bronze. Mosquitoes hum around your ears, and a heron struts in the shallows, unimpressed by your wrinkled attempt at wringing cloth. A child runs past with a bundle of wet linen twice her size, giggling when it splashes her legs. Laundry isn't glamorous, but it's alive, filled with chatter, sweat, and small joys. You notice a pile of tunics laid out flat on the sand to dry. They're stiff when the wind hits, but soon enough they'll soften again, bleached by sunlight into that crisp white Egyptians loved. White wasn't just fashionable. It symbolized purity, coolness, even connection to the divine. It also meant you got to show off how good your washer's arms were. And of course, if you stained yours with pomegranate juice, good luck explaining that away without blaming the gods. The chatter rises around you. A little gossip about a temple scribe, a joke about a fisherman's bad smell, and because humans are the same everywhere, the occasional complaint about husbands who never help with chores. One woman pretends to dunk her man's tunic a little too long, muttering that it might shrink to fit his ego better. Everyone laughs. You laugh too, and for a moment you almost forget the ache in your back. Here, in the soft glow of sunset, laundry feels less like drudgery and more like ritual bonding. Every slap of linen on stone is another beat in the shared rhythm of survival. You breathe deep, letting the scent of wet cloth and mud lull you. And just as your eyes start to close, you realize you're only at the very beginning of this long, sudsea journey through ancient Egyptian laundry. You linger by the riverbank, the sun now dropping lower, casting your shadow long and stretched across the rippling surface. The women near you exchange glances. One nods toward a clay pot set just beyond reach. She pulls you closer, curious to show you something that isn't just water and elbow grease. Inside, the contents look unappealing, thick grayish clumps sticky as tar. Yet this is their secret weapon, soap, or at least what passes for soap here. They scoop a bit out, smear it on damp linen, and you catch a faint odor, halfway between burnt firewood and last night's stew pot. This is where the ingenuity of ancient Egyptians really shines. You realize you're staring at a concoction born from leftovers, rendered animal fat mixed with ash. Not glamorous, but effective. The science behind it, though Egyptians didn't call it saponification, was simple. Ash brought the alkaline bite, fat brought the grease, and together they broke down grime. Congratulations, you're watching history's version of dish soap, minus the lemon scent. Fact: Egyptians are among the earliest people recorded to have created such soap-like substances, centuries before modern chemistry gave it fancy names. It wasn't mass-produced, more often made in small household batches, and sometimes mixed with other powders like clay or natron to improve the scrub. The quirky tidbit? Ash from different plants gave different qualities. Date palm ash produced a smoother paste, while acacia ash had a harsher grit, kind of like choosing between gentle exfoliating or extra strength at your local drugstore. You dip your fingers in, rubbing the coarse paste between thumb and palm. It bites against your skin, not sharp but certainly not silky. Imagine scrubbing your entire wardrobe with this. No wonder hands cracked, nails split, and cuticles rebelled. Still, you can't help but admire the resilience of the women kneeling in the water. They turn animal leftovers and fire soot into hygiene, a kind of everyday alchemy. Historians still argue whether these soap-like mixtures were widely used for personal bathing or just laundry and ritual cleansing. Some papyrus texts hint at body washes with oils and natron, while others mention pastes for linen. Perhaps soap's destiny wasn't bathtubs, but tunics and sheets. It makes sense. Nobody wanted to rub bacon grease paste on their skin before a banquet. As you lean back, you picture the making of this mixture. You're at a modest courtyard hearth, smoke curling, a clay cauldron balanced over glowing embers. A woman pours in rendered fat, saved from yesterday's goat stew, then sprinkles ash in, stirring with a carved wooden stick. The pot burbles, the smell less than heavenly, but there's pride in the act. Waste becomes utility. You watch her pour the thickened paste into a flat dish to cool, cutting it into lumpy blocks. They'll harden, crumble, and be used for weeks. You'd complain to customer service if you bought this at a store, but here, it's survival in a block. One joke slides in your head. Imagine unboxing your Amazon order to find a grey brick labeled Ash and Goat Tallow Deluxe. 5 stars for effectiveness, 1 star for smell. You chuckle under your breath, though the washerwoman beside you raises an eyebrow, probably thinking you're laughing at her soap. She smears a fresh layer onto a tunic, scrubbing stubborn stains with a reed brush. The fabric brightens under her hands, the coarse weave revealing its whiteness again. You realize how revolutionary this must have felt, taking stained, sweat-soaked cloth and coaxing it back to life. Cleanliness here isn't about sparkle, it's about dignity. Nearby, a young boy tries to help, dipping his fingers into the pot of ash-fat soap and dabbing it onto his cheek like war paint. His mother shoos him off with a laugh, telling him to rinse it before he smells like burnt goat forever. You can't help but laugh too. Even in antiquity, kids will find ways to turn chores into mischief. You look back at your hands. They smell faintly smoky, greasy, raw, but beneath it is a sense of connection. These clumps of ash and fat are the ancestors of every lavender-scented, factory-perfect bar of soap in your bathroom. And here you are, elbow to elbow with the inventors, learning that cleanliness has always been a mix of necessity, ingenuity, and a little suffering. The last rays of sun skim across the Nile. The air cools slightly, and a soft breeze lifts the edge of your drying tunic. You take one last whiff of that pungent ash paste and sigh. If this is the price of staying clean in Egypt, you'll pay it, though maybe you'll hold your nose. The Nile hums around you, but tonight you're wandering a little inland, to the crisp crust of desert flats where a glittering powder lies waiting. It's not glitter exactly, it's natron. If you kneel and scoop some, the grains slip between your fingers like coarse salt, leaving a faint dryness on your skin. This chalky treasure is one of the Egyptians' favorite cleaning agents. They used it for laundry, for mummification, for ritual purity, even for brushing their teeth. Yes, toothpaste with the flavor notes of baking soda and desert dust. not exactly minty fresh. Fact: natron is a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, harvested from dry lake beds like Wadi el Natron. Its alkaline properties made it brilliant for breaking down oils and stains, which is why it became a staple in Egyptian households. Quirky detail: natron was so valued that it even served as part of temple offerings. Imagine gifting the gods a nice basket of salty powder and expecting them to be pleased. You stand barefoot in the powder, and the desert sun bakes your shoulders. Around you, laborers crouch with reed baskets, scooping the natron into piles. The air smells faintly metallic, and the grains crunch underfoot. It's dry, relentless work, but without it, linen would never gleam the way Egyptians loved. You watch as a basket tips, sending a fine dust cloud into the air that sticks to your throat. You cough, wondering how many ancient workers spent their lives with lungs coated in alkaline grit. Now, back at the riverbank, women sprinkle handfuls of natron into water tubs, stirring until the liquid grows cloudy. A tunic soaks in, absorbing the salty mix. You watch as stains lighten, fibers stiffen, and the fabric transforms into a dazzling white that catches the sun. The smell isn't perfume. It's sharp mineral, a little like baking soda left too long in the cupboard. But here, white linen equals status. Priests wore it to symbolize purity, and workers wore it to show they weren't complete slobs. Historians still argue whether natron was more prized for laundry or for embalming. Was its fame born from sparkling linen, or from drying out pharaohs into perfect mummies? Papyrus records emphasize both, leaving modern scholars to debate whether we should think of natron first as detergent or death powder. Either way, it cleaned what needed cleaning, whether that was a tunic or a corpse. Sleep tight with that thought. You kneel, running your hands through a bowl of natron water. The liquid slicks against your skin, leaving your fingers faintly tingly. You remember using baking soda in your fridge to kill odors, and you realize you're sharing habits with someone who lived 4,000 years ago. Imagine telling an Egyptian, "I keep your sacred powder next to leftover pizza." They'd probably smite you with a linen whip. Nearby, a priestess demonstrates a ritual wash. She sprinkles natron over her hands, rubs her palms slowly, then rinses in a basin before stepping toward the temple. Cleanliness wasn't only about hygiene here, it was spiritual readiness. To touch the sacred, you first had to scrub away the dust of daily life. Laundry, ritual, health, they blurred together. All bound by this chalky powder, one joke drifts into your mind. The first Egyptian laundry ad probably went something like, "Tired of your tunic looking like it slept in a tomb? Try natron." You almost hear the jingle. The workers by the river stretch wet cloths on the sand again, now dusted with natron residue. The sun hardens them quickly, leaving them crisp, almost papery. The women shake the linen free of grit, and the result glows almost unnaturally white. You touch it, feeling both roughness and smoothness, a paradox woven into the very fibers. This is not just laundry. It's alchemy with sun and salt. A heron stalks past, pecking at the river edge. Children scoop the leftover natron water into little jars, smearing it on their arms, giggling at the slippery sensation. Their mothers laugh, scolding gently, but you see the joy in their faces. Even chores find moments of play. As night deepens, the desert air cools. Stars prick open the sky, sharp and endless. You breathe the mingled scents of wet linen, chalky natron and river mud, feeling strangely calmed. You're coated in dust, your nails rimmed with powder, but there's comfort in knowing this is how survival was woven, grain by grain, wash by wash, through the patient work of keeping linen bright. The stars fade as dawn rolls back across the horizon, and you're still here by the Nile, crouched among bundles of half-dried cloth. A rooster crows somewhere far in the village, and with the first light comes another sight, the tools of the trade. Laundry in ancient Egypt wasn't just bare hands and river water. They had an assortment of clever little devices that turned washing into an art form, or at least into something slightly less miserable. A woman beside you picks up a flat wooden paddle, worn smooth from years of use. She dunks a tunic into the shallows, spreads it out on a stone and begins to beat it with a steady rhythm. Each thwack is followed by a spray of water droplets that sparkle in the rising sun. Fact: archaeologists have uncovered depictions of such paddles on tomb wall paintings, suggesting that laundry tools were common enough to deserve immortalization. The paddle was both practical and symbolic, a reminder that even daily labor carried meaning in this culture. The quirky tidbit: some tools were improvised. Broken pottery shards became scrapers. Reed bundles became makeshift brushes. You imagine an Egyptian mom yelling at her kids, "Stop breaking my amphorae, I need those for stain removal." Somewhere in history, necessity met invention, and laundry ended up with a toolkit all its own. You pick up a clay basin. It's cool to the touch, heavy, perfect for soaking a tunic before scrubbing. These basins dotted the courtyards of households that could afford them, saving washerwomen the constant trek back to the Nile. The humbler families still hauled jars of water on their backs, their spines curving with every load. As you carry one experimentally, you wobble after 5 steps, realizing this chore alone was a daily endurance test. Who needs Pilates when you've got amphora lifting at dawn? Historians still argue whether every home had dedicated wash gear or if central laundry yards were common. The lack of surviving wooden paddles makes it hard to know. Wood rots, stone doesn't, so the debate lingers. Maybe villages pooled resources, or maybe every family cobbled together their own scrub kit. Either way, the rhythmic sounds of beating cloth were probably universal, echoing down the alleys like an early morning drumline. You kneel closer to the action. A laundress grabs a reed basket, tossing in rinsed garments, shaking them to drip dry before hauling them to a sunlit patch of sand. The basket is woven tight, sturdy, yet light enough for her to balance on her hip. You try lifting one, and the damp linen inside makes your muscles tremble. You imagine yourself dropping it mid-stride, tunic splattering into the mud, and the collective groan of everyone around you. Congratulations, you've just ruined half a day's work. Another woman uses a smooth stone as a scrubbing board. She rubs cloth against it with natron water, creating a gritty slurry that eats into stubborn stains. The sound is harsh, like chalk squeaking, but the effect is undeniable. The fabric lightens, fibers roughened yet renewed. You brush your hand along it, surprised at the crispness, and realize that cleanliness here had a tactile satisfaction. Laundry wasn't just about smell or look. It was about texture under the fingers, the sensation of freshness. A girl nearby is tasked with fanning drying cloth using a palm frond. She swings it lazily, the linen flapping like sails. You grin, thinking it looks like the world's first electric dryer, powered entirely by sibling resentment. She sighs dramatically, clearly bored, and you recognize the timeless teenage energy. Why am I even here? As the sun climbs, you notice the choreography of it all. Basins, paddles, baskets, stones. It's a dance of efficiency honed over centuries. Tools clatter, water sloshes, fabric slaps. Each washer finds her rhythm, and the group hums together like a river orchestra. You close your eyes, letting the sounds wash over you. Thwack, splash, scrape, flap. It's hypnotic, a lullaby made from hard labor. In your half-dreamy state, you almost imagine these tools whispering their own pride. Without us, no linen gleams, no priest prays clean, no pharaoh glows in white. One last image sticks with you. A boy playfully taps his sister's head with a laundry paddle, earning a scolding and a splash of cold river water in return. Everyone laughs, the tools briefly becoming toys. Even here in the grind of daily life, humor bubbles up. And you realize maybe laundry wasn't just survival. Maybe with the right paddle in hand, it was also community, connection, and a tiny chance to laugh before the day grew serious. You stretch your arms, the ache of carrying baskets still in your shoulders, and wander toward the village proper. The Nile fades behind you, but the smell of wet linen clings in the air. Here, in mud-brick courtyards and shaded alleys, you start to notice something subtle. Not everyone does their laundry the same way. Laundry in Egypt, like everything else, reveals the stripes of social class. Fact: wealthier households had laundries staffed by servants or slaves, while poorer families often scrubbed clothes themselves at the river. At the very top, temples and palaces maintained entire teams of washermen and washerwomen. Tomb paintings show lines of attendants carefully folding and storing garments for priests, queens, and pharaohs. Clean linen wasn't just comfort. It was a statement of wealth, purity, and prestige. You peek through a wide doorway into a royal laundry courtyard. Here servants bend over large basins, stirring cloth in natron solutions, linen piles higher than you stand, all waiting to be washed, dried, perfumed, and pressed. The smell is sharp, mingling mineral tangs with floral oils. A steward walks past, tallying cloth with a reed pen, scratching numbers on a wooden tablet. You catch him muttering about missing tunics. Even in antiquity, Laundry went missing in action. Contrast this with the humble hut down the lane. A farmer's wife kneels at a broken pot, scrubbing her husband's loincloth. She hums softly, her children splashing in the corner with reed toys. The cloth dries on a low fence, flapping like white flags in the breeze. Here laundry isn't prestige, it's necessity. No perfume, no ceremonial whiteness, just the hope of making dust-stained linen wearable again. The quirky tidbit: archaeological records suggest some temple laundries employed men as well as women. Men wielding paddles and wringing cloth might seem unusual in today's stereotypes, but it was part of temple service. Historians still argue whether this division reflected gender roles or simply the sheer volume of linen temples consumed. Priests needed fresh linen daily, sometimes multiple times a day, to remain ritually pure. One scholar half-joked that temple laundries were the laundromats of eternity. You walk further, stopping at a merchant's home. His courtyard hosts a hired washerwoman, a specialist who likely travels house to house. She's paid in bread, beer, or copper trinkets. She lays out tunics with care, pressing creases by hand. You wonder how many families relied on itinerant laundresses, trading barley loaves for clean clothes. It feels oddly modern, like calling in a laundry service app, except your delivery is on donkey back. Now think of the pharaoh himself. His linens were of the finest weave, sheer as mist, woven with thousands of threads. The royal laundries kept these garments spotless, ready for ceremonies, audiences, or simply lounging in palace halls. Imagine being the unlucky servant who spilled natron too heavily, leaving streaks across the pharaoh's favorite tunic. One mistake, and your career might dry out faster than the linen. You stroll back toward the drying fields where class distinctions still whisper. Priestly linen is laid on clean mats, guarded by temple novices, while farmers' shirts bake directly on hot sand. Servants shake cloth vigorously, beating dust away, while wealthier homes leave that step to underlings. You can practically hear linen itself boasting, "I was worn by a scribe. I only rubbed against plow handles." One moment makes you chuckle. A washer for a wealthy household passes by, balancing baskets high on her head. Her tunics glow brighter, her perfume stronger. A farmer's child stares at the pile, wide-eyed, then tugs his own dusty loincloth with a sigh. Across millennia, fashion envy still lives strong. As twilight edges closer, you realize laundry wasn't just a chore, but a mirror. The way cloth was washed, stored, scented, it all told stories of class, wealth, and faith. Linen spoke before you did, whispering where you stood in the social pyramid. And you, carrying a tunic stiff with natron, feel caught between worlds, not royal, not humble, just a sleepy traveler drifting through laundry lines of history. The air cools as the Nile breeze carries scents not just of wet fabric and mud, but something sweeter, spicier, and entirely unexpected. You follow it like a trail, winding through baskets of folded linen until you find a group of women leaning over jars, their fingers slick with oils. They dab droplets onto freshly dried cloth, massaging fragrance into the fibers as carefully as if they were applying makeup. You inhale, and suddenly the riverbank smells less like wet goat fat soap and more like a perfumery tucked into a desert courtyard. Fact: Egyptians adored perfumed oils. Lotus, myrrh, frankincense, cedarwood, all infused into daily life. They rubbed oils into their skin to keep it supple in the dry heat, but they also used these oils to perfume clothes. Priests burned incense during rituals, but outside the temple, people walked around trailing faint floral and resinous scents. Clean linen plus perfume equaled dignity, maybe even charm, the quirky detail. Some recipes for perfumed oils were guarded secrets, scribbled on papyrus scrolls like sacred spells. A blend of cedar oil with cinnamon might be prescribed, not just for good smell but to ward off illness. Imagine wearing your medicine as fragrance. One sniff for fresh breath, one sniff for plague prevention. Modern cologne ads would be jealous. You hold a strip of linen freshly treated with lotus oil. The fabric glistens faintly, the scent floral yet earthy like a pond at dawn. You rub it between your fingers, noticing the oil softens the stiff, natron-treated fibers, restoring flexibility. The transformation is tangible. Without oils, laundry left linen scratchy. With them, it became wearable again, smooth against sunburnt skin. Historians still argue whether perfumes were used primarily to cover body odor or to signal status. Was it deodorant or was it bling? Some tomb inscriptions praise scented linen as luxury, while others suggest it was basic hygiene in a world without showers. The debate lingers. drifting as invisibly as the scent itself. You watch as one woman pours cedar oil into a shallow bowl, her movements deliberate, almost reverent. She dips her fingertips, rubbing the oil into creases of a priest's robe. The woodsy aroma rises, mingling with lotus, forming a blend that feels like walking through a temple garden. Another woman sprinkles powdered myrrh directly onto cloth, then rolls it up tightly, sealing in the fragrance for later. These aren't random add-ons, they're part of a sensory language. To smell of lotus was refinement. To smell of cedar was power. You grin at a joke in your mind. Somewhere the first Egyptian teenager probably overdid it, showing up at the marketplace drenched in lotus oil, making everyone cough. Ancient Axe body spray. The children nearby play their own game. They swipe drops of oil onto each other's arms, giggling as the scents mingle. Their mothers scold, half amused, half worried that precious perfume is being wasted. You realize oils weren't cheap. They were commodities, traded across long caravan routes, carried in alabaster jars as precious as gemstones. To spill a drop on the dirt was to waste wealth. You lean over another jar, sniffing a blend of cinnamon and honey. It's thick, almost sticky, like syrup. The laundress dips a reed brush into it, painting streaks across a festival garment. The scent clings, promising to linger even after sweat joins the party. Perfumed laundry wasn't just for show. It was an armor of aroma. The scene grows drowsy in rhythm. Cloth rustles, jars clink, and faint breezes carry perfumes across the courtyard. You close your eyes, lulled by the layering of smells. Earthy natron, smoky ash soap, floral lotus, woody cedar. Each scent carries memory. Each memory carries meaning. By the time the last jar is sealed and tucked into a woven basket, the night air feels heavy with perfume. The stars overhead seem almost perfumed themselves, glowing gently as if swaying in the fragrance. And you, swaddled in scented linen, feel the day's grit finally melt away. Your tunic is crisp, soft and floral, a small miracle spun from desert, river and resin. You wake with the faintest scent of cedar still clinging to your tunic, only to realize that the work behind such clean and perfumed linen wasn't always voluntary. In Egypt's grand houses and palaces, laundry was often the domain of servants and slaves, those invisible hands that kept garments spotless without ever receiving praise. Their backs bent over basins, their palms rubbed raw, while their masters paraded in gleaming white kilts and pleated gowns as if linen cleaned itself. Fact, in wealthier households, enslaved people and hired servants were tasked with everything from hauling water to scrubbing stains. Tomb inscriptions sometimes mention groups of washermen or washerwomen attached to a noble's estate. Their work wasn't just domestic. It supported the image of their master. Because wrinkled or dirty linen would have been a public embarrassment, you picture it now, a courtyard lined with jars, natron piled in baskets, slaves kneeling in rows. One dunks cloth, another beats it with a paddle, another wrings it dry, their motions synchronized by necessity. The overseer paces nearby, reed stick in hand, making sure no tunic lingers in the water too long. The garments, once dried and perfumed, go not to the servants who worked them, but to the noble who will wear them to dinner. The quirky tidbit. Laundry slaves sometimes had to mark garments with signs or knots to keep track of which piece belonged to whom. Without tags or embroidered initials, mistakes happened. Imagine handing the high priest's robe to a scribe by accident. Somewhere in some courtyard, an enslaved washer probably muttered, "Well, good luck explaining that one to Ra." Historians still argue whether laundries within noble households were fully separate quarters or shared with other domestic tasks. Some believe there were specialized washing rooms. Others suggest it was all done in courtyards with temporary setups. The truth may vary by period and by household wealth. What's clear is that the labor was grueling and invisible. You crouch beside one servant, a young man scrubbing cloth until his fingers prune. His nails are split, his skin reddened by alkaline natron water. He wrings the tunic with practiced strength, twists it until water runs clear, then lays it neatly on a mat. There's no pride in his face, just weariness, but you sense that somewhere, deep down, he knows this work is part of Egypt's great machine of survival. Nearby, a woman hums a song as she folds cloth, her voice soft and steady. You catch fragments of lyrics, simple rhymes about river water and the sun's warmth. The tune carries a strange comfort, reminding you that even in servitude, people found ways to keep spirits alive. A child toddles into the scene, trying to copy the folding, his small hands clumsy. The adults chuckle softly, the moment a tiny crack in the wall of labor. One joke slips into your mind. Imagine being an enslaved washer and realizing you just cleaned the same kilt for the third time this week. Congratulations, you've invented fast fashion. The overseer looks unimpressed as you wander past, clearly uninterested in a stranger who isn't contributing to the workload. He mutters something sharp at a servant who dropped a tunic in the mud, and the poor woman scrambles to rewash it. You feel a pang, every drop of effort demanded, every mistake punished, all for linen that would never touch their own skin. The garments hang drying in neat lines, each one belonging to someone who likely never gave a thought to the aching arms behind it. You stand in the shadows, breathing the mingled scents of labor and perfume, wondering how many lives were measured out in baskets of laundry. The irony isn't lost on you. Linen symbolized purity and divinity, yet for those who washed it, the work was often chains disguised as chores. As evening settles in, torches flicker across the courtyard. Servants fold the last garments by firelight, stacking them in reed chests. A nobleman passes by, barely glancing at the rows of folded linen. To him, it's simply the way things should be. Linen ready, servants silent, the world in order. To you, though, it's another reminder that behind every shimmering robe on a temple wall, there were hands, weary and unseen, scrubbing life back into the cloth. The torches die down, leaving the courtyard quiet, but the rhythm of laundry never truly ends. You wander back toward the river and notice how the entire process shifts depending on the Nile's moods. Laundry in Egypt was never a fixed routine. It rose and fell with the river's rhythms, the seasons, and the unpredictable floods that both nourished and complicated life. Fact, the Nile's annual inundation was central to Egyptian existence. When the river swelled and spilled across the floodplain, it left behind fertile soil, but it also reshaped how and where people did their chores. At flood peak, washerwomen had to adapt, finding new banks or moving closer to elevated ground. In low water seasons, they might trek farther, lugging heavy jars to reach the shrinking edge. The quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed washing clothes during the very first days of the flood brought bad luck, as if the sacred waters needed time to settle. Others sprinkled natron into floodwater as an offering, hoping the river gods would grant clear streams for easier rinsing. Historians still argue whether these practices were religiously mandated or just clever excuses to postpone laundry a few days. You picture it, midsummer heat pressing down, the Nile swelling, crocodiles sunning on newly formed sandbars. A group of laundresses sets up near the shallows, tying their skirts higher than usual to wade deeper into the rising water. Their laughter floats over the current as they chase cloth that drifts away, tunics bobbing like ghostly fish. One child shrieks when a turtle bumps into her leg, sending everyone into gales of amusement. Laundry in this season comes with surprises. During drought, the story flips. The waterline drops low, revealing cracked mud and stones. Washerwomen must walk farther, bending over narrow trickles that barely cover their basins. The cloth comes out stiffer, less rinsed, tinged with earthy smells. You kneel and scoop some yourself, watching sediment swirl. It feels like washing clothes in soup, thick and stubborn. You wonder how many Egyptians sighed through these dry months, longing for the flood's abundance. Historians debate how much the temple laundries depended on these seasonal shifts. Some argue temples had private wells or cisterns, insulating priests from the river's moods. Others believe even sacred linen relied on the same fickle current, tying divine purity to the unpredictable Nile. The truth may lie in between. As so often in history, you crouch at the riverbank during a twilight wash. The water reflects stars, making it look like a sky you could reach down and scrub. Women move more slowly now, weary from the day. Their paddles strike softer, their chatter muted. The seasons work heavy on their shoulders. Yet even in exhaustion, there's grace. They lean into the rhythm of water, their lives braided into the Nile's eternal pulse. One joke bubbles in your thoughts. Doing laundry during flood season is basically ancient extreme sports. Forget surfing, try chasing your underwear downstream. A breeze carries reeds whispering along the bank, and you let the sound wrap around you. It's oddly soothing, like the Nile is humming a lullaby. You imagine generations of Egyptians falling asleep to this same rustle, dreaming of clear water and sunlit linen. The river gave life, it gave food, It gave fertile fields, and it gave laundry days dictated by its rise and fall. You stretch, yawning as the moon slides higher. The Nile glimmers like a silver serpent winding endlessly. Tomorrow it may flood more or recede, or surprise with silt and sand. Whatever it brings, people will adapt, trudging back with baskets, hauling jars, bending low to scrub. The laundry, like the river, never truly ends. It just changes its flow. The moonlight fades into a pale dawn, and you wander back into the heart of the village. Everywhere you look, linen hangs stiff across fences, reed poles, and flat rooftops. This time you focus not on how it's washed, but on what exactly gets scrubbed in the first place. You realize that the Egyptians' wardrobes were simple in shape, but surprisingly varied in detail, and each piece demanded its own sort of care. Fact: the foundation of Egyptian clothing was linen, woven from flax fibers grown along the Nile. Men typically wore kilts, simple rectangular cloth wrapped around the waist, while women wore sheath dresses, snugly fitted and often held up with straps. The elite added pleating, folds, and longer hems, while laborers stuck to shorter, practical versions. Children sometimes wore nothing at all until adolescence, which meant fewer laundry worries for parents, until you remembered that children found ways to cover themselves in mud anyway. The quirky tidbit: some pleated garments had to be restarched after every wash to keep their crisp folds. Imagine the patience required: washing, drying, then carefully folding and pressing each pleat into place by hand. Historians still argue whether starching was done with natural gums, natron, or simply by dampening and pressing with heated stones. The evidence is inconclusive, but anyone who's ever ironed a shirt knows the pain. You pick up a freshly dried kilt. It's light, airy, almost translucent in the sun. The weave is loose, the edges frayed from years of wear. It smells faintly of natron, sharp and clean. A farmer might wear this until it literally disintegrated, patching holes with scrap strips. You run your fingers along the worn hem, imagining the hands that stitched it again and again, fighting against Egypt's ever-present dust. Nearby, a priest's linen robe flutters. It gleams brighter, woven tighter, dyed slightly with ochre to give it a faint cream hue. Priests changed clothes constantly, since ritual demanded freshness. You picture endless piles of white robes lined up, waiting for cleansing. The effort behind that shine feels overwhelming, an army of washermen just to keep one temple running. A young girl trots past wearing a simple sheath dress. It clings to her frame, practical but graceful, the kind of garment depicted in countless statues. She laughs as her little brother, naked but for a beaded necklace, chases her with a reed stick. Their mother sighs, already calculating how much more laundry she'll have to do after their play. Some things never change. Children and mess are eternal companions. You lean into a basket where loincloths are piled, the undergarments of Egyptian daily life. They're small, triangular, easy to wash, but frequent wear meant constant cleaning. You chuckle to yourself, thinking, congratulations. You're holding the ancestor of the modern laundry nightmare, endless underwear cycles. Historians still argue how colorful Egyptian wardrobes truly were. Tomb paintings show vivid hues, reds, blues, greens. Yet surviving fragments suggest most everyday clothing was white or undyed. Did bright garments fade quickly? Were colors reserved for ritual? The debate lingers, adding a splash of mystery to what you see hanging on the lines. You wander past drying pleated tunics, their folds stiff in the wind. Women tug them gently, smoothing them into place, murmuring about keeping the gods pleased with perfect creases. The cloth cracks faintly as it bends, proof of its starch. You imagine showing up at a banquet with limp pleats. It would be like arriving at a wedding in sweatpants. Social disaster. One boy, mischief in his eyes, pulls a tunic from the line, wraps it around himself, and strikes a mock pharaoh pose. Everyone laughs, though his mother smacks him lightly and hangs it back up. Even laundry offers moments of play acting, a reminder that clothing isn't just fabric. It's identity, aspiration, and sometimes comedy. The sun climbs higher, illuminating every flutter of linen. Kilts, sheaths, robes, loincloths, all whisper stories of dust, sweat, ritual, and survival. You touch one last garment, still damp, its fibers cool against your palm. You realize that what needed washing wasn't just cloth, it was the daily grind of life itself, woven into every fiber, scrubbed away only to return tomorrow. The morning breeze carries you past the village huts, and soon you're standing before a grand temple complex. Its pylons rise high, carved with gods and pharaohs, while incense smoke drifts lazily above the gates. You step inside, and the world of laundry suddenly feels less domestic and far more eternal. Here, even the act of washing cloth is tied to the sacred. Fact: temples demanded vast quantities of linen. Priests were required to change into clean garments several times a day, and offerings to the gods often included folded pieces of fresh cloth. Tombs, too, were stocked with linen, sometimes mountains of it, meant to wrap the dead and clothe them in eternity. The act of washing wasn't just practical. It was spiritual maintenance, keeping mortals and gods alike pure. The quirky tidbit: archaeologists have uncovered tombs with laundry lists carved or written down, literally inventories of garments to be provided for the deceased. Imagine journeying into the afterlife only to check your eternal to-do list. 1 pleated kilt, 2 festival robes, 3 loincloths. It feels both profound and faintly absurd, like being buried with a Costco receipt. You walk deeper into the temple, past rows of storerooms filled with folded linen. Young novices carry bundles, their arms straining under the weight. In a shaded courtyard, washermen kneel before basins, carefully cleansing robes for ritual. They work with almost religious focus, their movements slower, more deliberate, as if each scrub is a prayer. You kneel beside them, feeling the gravity of the task. This is linen not just for wear, but for communion with gods. Historians still argue whether temple laundries were permanent fixtures or temporary setups during festivals. Some evidence points to dedicated rooms, with drainage channels carved into stone floors. Others suggest temporary washing stations were set up when linen demand spiked. The debate matters because it shapes how we understand the logistics of maintaining divine purity. Did priests oversee year-round laundry crews, or did they scramble seasonally like divine spring cleaners? You slip into a tomb chamber, guided by torchlight. There, piles of linen rest beside sarcophagi, still faintly intact after millennia. You brush your fingers against the fragile fibers, thin, brittle, yet astonishingly preserved. These wrappings once hugged a body, binding flesh for its journey into eternity. Cleanliness here wasn't about appearances. It was about preparing the soul for the afterlife. Linen was the bridge between worlds. One joke hums in your mind. Somewhere in ancient Thebes, a washer probably muttered, "If I have to wash one more funeral shroud, I'm going to need one myself." Back in the temple, incense mixes with the sharp scent of natron. A priest sprinkles the powder over a freshly laundered robe, blessing it before draping it across a statue. The cloth gleams white against the polished stone, a visual reminder that purity was as much about laundry as it was about prayer. You marvel at the thought. Somewhere holiness was measured in thread count. Children play in the temple courtyard, weaving strips of scrap linen into dolls. Their laughter echoes against the stone, a lightness amid solemnity. Their mothers hush them, reminding them of the God's presence, but you sense that even the divine would smile at the innocence. The scraps they play with are offcuts from sacred linen, destined for no grand ritual. Yet even in play they hold whispers of eternity. As dusk falls, the temple laundry's quiet. Novices fold the last of the garments, stacking them neatly in chests bound for storage or ceremony. You step back into the evening air, the sky a deepening indigo. Behind you the temple walls glow faintly in torchlight, holding within them the hum of countless laundries, robes washed, folded, and offered to the divine. You carry the scent of incense and natron with you, knowing you've glimpsed not just laundry, but eternity wrapped in cloth. You drift away from the temple, back into the village where daily life resumes its steady rhythm. By now you've seen linen beaten, scrubbed, rinsed, perfumed, and folded. But where did all those pastes, powders, and soaps actually rest between uses? The answer lies in jars, boxes, and the humble art of storage. Without them, natron would scatter in the wind, oils would sour in the heat, and soap lumps would crumble into dust. Fact: Egyptians stored cleansing materials in pottery jars, alabaster vessels, and sometimes in carved stone containers. Archaeologists have uncovered small soapstone bowls still crusted with powdery residues, suggesting they once held natron or ash mixtures. Vessels mattered. Stone kept powders dry, alabaster kept oils cool, and pottery offered affordable practicality. The quirky tidbit? Some jars for perfume and oil were shaped like animals or fruit, little works of art that also preserved precious substances. Imagine rubbing your laundry soap out of a clay jar, shaped like a pomegranate. Historians still argue whether these decorative jars were everyday tools or strictly reserved for elites. Perhaps most households used plain pottery, while temples and nobles indulged in artistry. You lean into a storage shed, its cool interior shaded by palm fronds. Shelves of clay jars line the walls, some stoppered with woven lids, others sealed with wax. The air smells faintly sharp, natron dust rising whenever a lid is cracked open. You run your fingers along one jar, the surface rough and cool, its belly bulging with powder. Another jar, slim and elegant, holds cedar oil. The stopper releases a faint resinous whiff when you nudge it loose. A washerwoman lifts a lumpy bar of ash-fat soap from a shallow dish. It's hardened slightly, cracking at the edges. She wraps it in scrap linen, tying it with twine to keep crumbs contained. Her motions are practiced, careful. Waste nothing, spill nothing. Soap took time and labor to produce, so every chunk was guarded. Children peek in, tempted to play with the strange lumps, and she shoos them out with a half-serious scowl. Historians still argue whether soap-making was done in bulk or strictly in small household batches. Without written recipes from everyday life, it's hard to know. Some scholars think local specialists may have sold soaps in markets, while others insist it was always a cottage task, passed down through families. The jars themselves keep the question alive, whispering possibilities without ever giving certainty. You pick up an alabaster jar, light filtering through its translucent walls. It glows faintly golden, as if it holds captured sunlight. Inside is perfumed oil, thick and rich, gleaming when you tilt it. The vessel is cool to your touch, a reminder of alabaster's role in preserving precious substances against desert heat. Her noblewoman would have cherished such a jar, keeping her linens smelling of lotus long after the blossoms had wilted. Nearby, a reed basket holds chalky lumps of natron wrapped in cloth pouches. You squeeze one gently, powder spilling into your palm. The grains cling, stinging faintly, a reminder of their strength. A servant quickly brushes it back into the basket, muttering about careless fingers. Even scraps had value, nothing wasted in a land where the desert loomed just beyond the fields. One joke stirs in your mind. Imagine walking into an ancient Egyptian marketplace and hearing a vendor shout, "2 jars of natron for a loaf of bread. Limited time only." You almost hear the bargaining echoing across the stalls. As evening falls, you notice how carefully each jar is sealed away, lids tightened, baskets tucked onto high shelves. Cleanliness depended not just on washing, but on preservation. Without proper storage, oils spoiled, natron clumped, and all the day's work went to waste. Egyptians, ever practical, turned jars and chests into guardians of cleanliness. You step outside, the night air cooler now. The stars blink awake, and somewhere in the distance you hear laughter from the riverbank. You carry the image of those jars with you, each one a tiny world holding powders, pastes and perfumes, fragile, ordinary, yet essential to the grand rhythm of Egyptian life. The night lingers soft around the village, but as you head back toward the river, you notice that the real heartbeat of laundry isn't just in the scrubbing or rinsing, it's in the people gathered together. For every paddle strike and every wrung-out tunic, there's conversation bubbling like a second current. Laundry is work, but it's also a stage for gossip, storytelling, and the quiet weaving of community. Fact: in many societies, laundry sites doubled as social spaces. Ancient Egypt was no different. The Nile's banks became meeting grounds where women, and sometimes men, exchanged news, arranged marriages, and whispered about temple politics. For communities scattered across farms and desert edges, Laundry Day meant connection. The quirky tidbit: some surviving love songs from ancient Egypt reference riversides and water as places of romance. Scholars suspect these may have been inspired, in part, by the scenes of young people meeting during chores. Historians still argue whether laundry sites were informal marketplaces of information and matchmaking, or simply convenient excuses to chat while working. The truth likely leaned toward both. You settle beside a group of women bent over the water. Their hands work automatically, dunk, slap, ring, while their voices ripple with laughter. One woman tells of a fisherman who slipped and landed face first in a basket of eels. Another teases her neighbor about the scribe, who always strolls past just as she happens to be washing linen. The laughter grows, echoing against the reeds. You smile, realizing you're listening to the ancient version of a neighborhood coffee shop chat. A cluster of younger girls huddles apart, whispering in conspiratorial tones. Their eyes dart toward a group of boys hauling baskets, and giggles erupt. One girl flicks a drop of water at another, accusing her of pretending her tunic needed rewashing, just to watch a particular boy. You can't help but think, Laundry Day doubles as the original teen drama. Historians still argue how much gossip from the riverbank influenced temple or royal life. Did rumors born among suds really ripple all the way up the social pyramid? Some suggest yes, pointing out that servant chatter often carried into noble courts. Others believe such talk stayed local, harmless as soap bubbles. You listen half-drowsy to the voices around you. Knowing gossip has always had a way of traveling farther than expected. One joke sneaks into your head, somewhere along the Nile. The phrase airing your dirty laundry in public probably started literally. You grin at the thought of tunics flapping like scandal sheets in the breeze. The sun dips lower and the chatter softens. Older women swap remedies for stains, natron for grease, clay for wine, even a paste of crushed beans for stubborn spots. Their advice carries the weight of generations, passed hand to hand like secret recipes. You jot them down mentally, though you doubt your modern washing machine will appreciate bean paste cycles. Meanwhile, children splash in the shallows, shrieking with delight. A boy pretends to be a crocodile, snapping his arms like jaws while the others scatter. Their mothers shake heads, pretending irritation, but you catch their smiles. The water is cold, refreshing, alive, and so are the people who gather here. You close your eyes and let the sounds sink in. Laughter, gossip, paddles striking water, birds calling across the river. It's a lullaby woven of voices and chores, proof that even hard labor could be softened by community. Laundry wasn't only about stains. It was about stories, secrets, and the timeless human need to share life while hands are busy. The moon climbs slowly, silvering the river. Voices fade one by one as families carry baskets home. The bank grows quiet, but you can still hear echoes of the day's laughter. They linger in your ears as you breathe in the night air, carrying with you the warm truth that even soap and suds can sparkle when paired with company. The chatter fades with the night, and you find yourself alone on the riverbank, listening to the faint slap of water against reeds. It dawns on you that beneath all the labor, beneath the oils, natron, and chatter, laundry in Egypt carried a weight far beyond clean cloth. It was bound to ideas of purity, to the unseen threads between the body and the divine. Cleanliness here wasn't just convenience, it was symbolism. Fact, in Egyptian culture, purity was essential to religious practice. Priests bathed multiple times a day, shaved their bodies, and dressed in freshly laundered linen before performing rituals. Clean clothes weren't fashion, they were declarations of readiness to approach the sacred. The whiteness of linen shimmering under temple lamps signaled not just hygiene but holiness. The quirky tidbit: some Egyptians believed wearing freshly laundered linen could literally repel illness, almost like a shield woven from purity itself. Papyrus fragments even describe ritual washings, where cloths were cleansed in natron water, not for stains but to banish spiritual pollution. Historians still argue whether these practices reflected genuine medical theory or were purely symbolic. Perhaps both. Belief and biology blending together as so often in ancient worlds. You step into a temple courtyard at dawn. Priests stand in rows, robes immaculate, the scent of lotus and cedar wafting from their folds. They chant softly, voices rising like incense. Each garment gleams with painstaking care, whiteness reflecting the first rays of sun. You realize for them laundry was a ladder to the divine. Without clean cloth there was no prayer. Without purity, no connection. And yet outside the temple, villagers felt similar bonds. A farmer dons his freshly washed kilt before stepping into the fields, whispering thanks for the Nile's waters. A mother scrubs her child's loincloth, muttering charms as if rinsing away not just dirt but danger. Cleanliness became a language of hope, resilience, and renewal. Historians still argue over how ordinary Egyptians interpreted purity. Was it deeply spiritual or simply practical survival? Perhaps both again. After all, a clean tunic feels good, whether you're a pharaoh or a farmer. But in Egypt, that feeling was elevated, celebrated, painted into tomb walls and sung in hymns. You trail your fingers through a drying robe, its folds crisp, its fibers humming faintly in your imagination. You picture how it will be worn into a tomb, wrapped around a body, signaling eternal readiness. Linen wasn't just fabric, it was soul armor. One joke surfaces gently. If modern gyms sold memberships to Egyptian priests, the slogan would be, "Come for the workouts, stay for the 5 daily laundry changes." You smile, imagining priests sighing as they changed robes for the 100th time that week. The sun climbs, and the whiteness of linen dazzles you. Birds skim across the river, and in that light even the simplest loincloth seems radiant. Cleanliness here is almost aggressive in its beauty, a declaration that dust and sweat will not win. You breathe deep, letting the scent of natron and perfume mingle, feeling strangely uplifted. As the day warms, villagers gather their dry garments, folding them neatly into reed baskets. You watch one woman press her lips gently to a tunic before tucking it away as if blessing it. Another murmurs a short prayer over a child's dress. Each action, small as it is, feels like a quiet ritual. Laundry becomes devotion in miniature. The river sparkles brighter now, carrying silt, secrets, and perhaps a stray tunic or two downstream. You stand in silence, sensing the thread between earth, river, cloth, and soul. Purity here isn't spotless perfection. It's the act of trying, of scrubbing again tomorrow, of never letting dust win for long. In that cycle lies meaning, woven into every fold of Egyptian linen. The sun slides toward the horizon, painting the river bronze. And as you wander back through the drying fields, you notice something unspoken. Not every laundry day ends in triumph. Egypt's linen may have been prized for its purity and crispness, but accidents, mishaps, and outright disasters were part of the fabric too. For every perfectly folded robe, there was a tunic stained forever, or a pleat ruined beyond repair. Fact, linen is notoriously difficult to dye, yet Egyptians sometimes managed pale shades, reds, yellows, blues, using natural plant pigments. But those dyes weren't stable. One hard wash in natron water, and the colors bled into muddy smudges. The evidence shows fragments of garments where dyes faded unevenly, suggesting that laundry could quite literally wash the magic out of a garment. The quirky tidbit? Some households apparently tried to re-dye faded pieces using crushed flowers or even mineral dust, which didn't always work. Imagine walking into a feast in a robe sprinkled with dust that turned into streaks of sludge at the first sign of sweat. Historians still argue whether color mishaps were common or rare luxury problems. Was it only the elites experimenting with hues, or did everyday Egyptians dabble with clumsy home dyes? You crouch beside a woman holding up a once-pleated dress. The creases are limp, the fabric sagging sadly. She sighs, mutters a prayer, then sets about repleating with a damp reed and hot stone. The folds steam faintly, stiffening back into shape. You try it yourself and immediately scorch a corner. Congratulations, you've invented the world's first laundry burn mark. She laughs at your clumsiness, shaking her head. Nearby, a young boy stumbles with a basket and dumps half the clean linen into wet mud. The gasp from his mother could wake the gods. She scrambles to rewash, muttering sharp words about careless hands. The boy sulks, drawing circles in the dirt. You recognize the timelessness of the scene. Mothers exasperated, children guilty. Laundry forever, the battlefield of family patience. Historians still argue about whether linen was always bleached back to pure white, or whether families tolerated stains and discolorations. Archaeological fragments show both. Some linen kept remarkably pristine, others patched, frayed, and forever marked. Perhaps tolerance varied. Priests needed spotless robes, but a farmer could shrug at a grape juice blotch. One joke floats up. The missing sock mystery isn't modern. Somewhere in Egypt, a servant probably grumbled, "I swear I had 2 loincloths when I started." You grin, imagining centuries of lost laundry haunting riverbeds. You pass another group of women sighing over shrunk tunics. Linen fibers tightened unpredictably, especially if over-soaked in natron. One woman tugs at a garment, frowning that it might now only fit her child. She groans but then smiles faintly. At least someone in the family benefits, even the temples weren't immune. A priest gestures angrily at a robe blotched by uneven bleaching. The laundresses bow low, promising to correct it, though all know the stain is permanent. The robe is quietly demoted, reserved for lesser rituals. You realize laundry mishaps rippled far beyond households. They touched divine service itself. As twilight falls, the mishaps turn almost comical. A tunic flaps off a drying line, caught by wind, tumbling into the river. Children chase it, splashing, while adults shake their heads. Another robe stiffens so much in the sun that it cracks like parchment when folded. Someone laughs, declaring it could serve better as a shield. You breathe deep, letting the absurdities soothe you. Perfection was rare, mistakes inevitable, but the rhythm of washing endured. The Nile carried away stains, the sun dried failures, and tomorrow brought another chance. Laundry disasters, like life's, were temporary, softened by humor and persistence. The moon climbs high, silvering the river, and you realize the story of Egyptian laundry is drifting to its close. Yet before you let the night take you fully, there's one more thread to follow, the legacy. For though the paddles, jars, and natron belong to ancient sands, their echoes ripple into later centuries and even into the soap sitting quietly in your bathroom today. Fact: the Egyptians weren't alone in their soapy experiments, but their mixtures of natron, ash, and fat influenced later Mediterranean cultures. By the time the Romans came along, they developed fullers' soap and laundries called fulanique, where cloth was cleaned with alkaline solutions, and yes, even with fermented urine. Suddenly the Egyptian ash paste doesn't seem so bad. The quirky tidbit: some scholars suggest Egyptian trade routes carried knowledge of cleansing substances into Mesopotamia and beyond, spreading not just spices and textiles, but the art of stain fighting. From there, recipes mutated. Olive oil soaps in the Levant, harsher lies in Europe, perfumed concoctions in Arabia. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians were the direct inventors of soap as we know it, or simply one bright node in a web of parallel discoveries. You picture it: caravans loaded with natron winding through desert tracks, jars of oil bumping in woven baskets, merchants haggling in crowded markets. Alongside gold and papyrus, they sold the promise of cleanliness. What started as a handful of salty grains on a riverbank became part of global history, bubbling its way into countless homes. You kneel at the Nile one last time. Washerwomen still slap tunics against stones. Children still giggle. Servants still haul baskets. The rhythm continues, yet you sense it stretching forward. One day, pleated linen will give way to Roman togas, then to medieval woolens, then to cotton shirts spinning in electric machines. But the pulse is the same: water, fabric, human hands refusing to let dirt win. One joke rises gently. If Egyptians had known about laundry pods, they'd probably have thought they were amulets and then accidentally eaten one during a festival. You chuckle quietly, letting the absurdity mingle with the solemnity of legacy. The night deepens, and with it your own weariness. The smells linger: smoky ash, mineral natron, sweet lotus oil. They fade slowly, like dreams dissolving at dawn. Around you, the linen hangs white against the dark, glowing faintly as if it still holds moonlight. You lie back on the sand, feeling the warmth of the day still clinging to the earth beneath. The stars scatter above, endless and indifferent. Yet here you are, cocooned in stories of soap and cloth, reminded that even the most ordinary acts, washing, scrubbing, folding, can carry echoes across millennia. Laundry may never be glamorous, but it is eternal. And now, as the river quiets and the last tunics dry stiff on their lines, it's time to let the story dissolve into stillness. The sounds that filled your ears all night, the slaps of linen on stone, the chatter of washerwomen, the trickle of water down amphorae, begin to soften, like echoes fading into distance. You no longer feel the grit of natron on your fingers, or the smoky sting of ash paste in your nose. Instead, you feel only a hush, a calm stretching wide as the desert night. The linen hangs in the breeze, whispering faintly. Each fold drifts like a sail, carrying you further away from the clamor of work and into gentler waters. You let your body grow heavier, as if the sand itself is rising to cradle you. The river hums slow and steady, rocking you like a lullaby. You're safe here, wrapped in the same rhythms that soothed generations long before you. Breathe in slow and deep. The air is warm but kind, brushing your face like a soft hand. Breathe out, and with it release the day's dust, the noise, the weight of chores. What remains is lightness, a simple glow of linen under the stars. You drift further now, thoughts dissolving like soap in water, until only stillness remains. The story has folded itself neatly, tucked away like clean cloth, ready for another time. Sleep takes you gently, as surely as the Nile carries silt. You float, light as linen on the breeze, into the quiet of your own night, and there, wrapped in calm, you rest,